if you're watching this video, that means you made it all the way to 2021. You survived 2020, you survived a global pandemic. No, that's not over. Never mind. So, today I'm going to be talking about some of the best movies of 2020, whatever we had, because obviously 2020 we saw a lot of movies get delayed, a lot of movies had to change up their presentation, they had to go from the theaters to online, a lot of things just happened, and this was a pretty hard list to make overall, and I was kind of worried, like, with all these movies getting delayed, I was kind of thinking, oh, this list is it's not going to be good, unfortunately, and then this year happened with movies, and surprisingly, there were a lot of decent movies that came out last year. So let's get into it with some honorable mentions, at least. First up, News of the World, which I thought was very well acted, very well shot, very well scored. It's a very beautiful looking movie, as long as you can get past some of the repetitive moments of the movie. Pieces of a Woman, which was a movie that I didn't get a chance to review. But I will say this, I'm a sucker for long takes, I'm a sucker for that. I loved that 30-minute long take at the beginning of the movie. All the performances are fantastic, particularly from Vanessa Kirby, and kind of like News of the World, it's a little repetitive, but it's effective, I'll say. The Outpost, this was a movie that came out earlier in the year that I didn't get a chance to review. This is a movie with a very realistic take on soldiers and PTSD, and that's just something that I'm always interested in, and I thought this movie was also very effective in that way. Palm Springs, this was a very interesting comedy with a very good dynamic between Andy Samberg and Kristen Milioti. The time loop concept was worked into the movie very well. It was very funny, and it improves on a second watch. Run. I'm putting this on my best of the year list, and only because, like, I definitely was very affected by this movie in a way, even though, like, I complained that the movie's a little too similar to Misery, almost a direct copy, I would say. I still really liked the acting. I love the dynamic between the two lead characters. I didn't think it was over the top, and it was a very solid thriller overall. It's not as good as the director's first movie, Searching, but it was still good. Bad Education. This was a movie that was on HBO, and it came out during the start of the pandemic, and I'm putting it on here. And I thought Hugh Jackman and Allison Janney were fantastic. I was very interested in the story after I learned, like, wait, this actually happened? Because, like, you often don't hear about these, like, stories from, like, these stories about, like, high schoolers and, like, in a high school or anything like that. It's definitely very interesting. It can be kind of darkly comic, and it's definitely a very interesting watch, very fascinating subject matter. Wolfwalkers. This is a movie that's on Apple TV, and this is a 2D drawn animated movie that's the animation's perfect. I really like the friendship between the two lead characters. It's a very interesting story that admittedly has been kind of done before, but, you know, it got me emotionally invested, so I'll give it that. The Way Back. This was a movie one of the last movies I saw in theaters before... No, this was the last movie I saw in theaters before lockdown. And Ben Affleck, he's fantastic. This is one of his best performances. Definitely a very interesting take on sports drama, so I'll give it that. And it got me thinking afterwards about it. So any movie that can do that, it's good in my opinion. One Night in Miami, Regina King's directorial debut. I thought this was fantastic. The dialogue is fantastic. All the performances are fantastic. Even though, obviously, the situation never happened, but it kind of makes you think about, like, the situation, like, what they're talking about and how it kind of applies to the world, and, like, especially given the last year as well. Definitely a very fascinating watch. And Relic. This is a movie I actually really enjoyed. A lot of people didn't, and I can understand why. But it was a movie that I admittedly kind of got into it more a second time, because it's like, I can understand, like, the symbolism, the imagery, and it's one of those movies that's, depending on how you feel about the subject matter, you'll definitely feel that way about this movie. And since it's kind of been affected me personally, I feel like this movie really hit home with me. So now let's get into my actual top 10 list. These were the top 10 movies of 2020, whatever movies we had. So at number 10, Sound of Metal. Now I gave this movie 3 out of 4 stars when I initially reviewed it. I'll bump it up to 3.5 out of 4 stars because the performances are fantastic. Riz Ahmed is fantastic in this movie. So is Paul Raci and Olivia Cooke. They're all really good in this movie. The sound design is spectacular, and it kind of made me appreciate sound design more with movies. So I thought, oh, what's so great about sound design or whatever? And this movie basically shows that. And definitely a very, I won't say powerful, but definitely a very interesting movie on a difficult subject matter. Speaking of difficult subject matters, this is basically going to be an entire list. Number 9 is Another Round. This is a movie from Denmark starring Mads Mikkelsen. Another movie I didn't get a chance to review, but I thought the performances were fantastic. Another kind of darkly comic movie that is hopeful, I would say. It has fantastic performances, the blend of comedy and drama, and sometimes horror even, I would say. They all work very well in this movie. I definitely appreciate this movie a lot. And number 8 is a movie called Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. This is a movie where another very difficult subject matter, and honestly, I don't know if I can really sit through it again, unfortunately. But the performances are fantastic, particularly from Sydney Flanagan, who gives this very somber performance in a scene where she just basically has to answer all these questions, and I thought that was just fantastic. And the relationship between the two girls is also really good as well. It's just a movie that I can't really sit down and watch again. It's definitely a hard watch, but I think it's an important watch, is what I'll say. At number 7, going a little lighthearted, well, kind of, The King of Staten Island. Now, I was a little mad because the Golden Globes completely shut this movie out. And yet they gave James Corden a nomination, so what do I know? Anyway, The King of Staten Island, I thought Pete Davidson was fantastic. It's a movie where I felt like I related to him, I understood him. His character goes through a great arc in the movie. I thought he was fantastic. I thought everyone around him was fantastic. And a lot like Judd Apatow movies, I think the comedy and the drama work very well, even if the movie is a little too long. That was my main gripe with this movie. At number 6 is The Trial of the Chicago 7. I could have put this in number 7, but I didn't because that's how much I enjoy it. The Trial of the Chicago 7 is a movie I wish I reviewed, and I didn't. It's a fantastic movie across the board. Every single performance is fantastic. Sacha Baron Cohen, Mark Rylance, Frank Langella, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. Everyone in this movie is fantastic. You could pick anyone out from this cast and be like, oh, I like them the most. It's like, you know what? I don't blame you for liking them. They were fantastic. They were great. I thought this story was very interesting. I didn't know about it. And it definitely relates a lot to like what's happened in the last year as well. Really seem to enjoy that. The only downside is why this is only number 6 is because I wish they wrapped up Bobby Seale's story a little bit better than they did. But, oh well. Overall, movie's fantastic. Please check it out. It's really good. At number 5 is The Invisible Man, a movie that one of the last movies I saw before lockdowns happened. This movie was very effective, very scary, very creative. Every moment of this movie, I was scared, I would say. Like, it's a very intense movie, and especially when you don't know where it's coming, how it's coming, and it's just really unpredictable. Elizabeth Moss is fantastic in this movie. Almost everyone else in this movie is really good. The guy who plays the Invisible Man, he's creepy as hell, and it definitely addresses its subject matter seriously. Unlike some other horror movies that have done this, it is a very, very good time. Well, despite the subject matter, it is a very well done movie, I'll say. And number 4 is The Five Bloods, kind of like The Trial of the Chicago 7. I'm not putting this at number 5. That's how much I appreciate this movie. Spike Lee continues his luck with The Five Bloods, a movie that is very, very good. The actors do a fantastic job in this movie. It's beautifully shot. You never really feel lost. Despite its almost 3 hours runtime, the performances are fantastic, particularly from Delroy Lindo. He's fantastic. Chadwick Boseman in one of his last performances, unfortunately. It's very heartbreaking to look back at that performance and like, oh my god, I feel so bad now. And it's very well shot, very well scored. I really appreciate this movie. I think it speaks a lot about how, you know, these soldiers, they were sent to war and how they're not really being treated well. And especially because of their race, they're definitely not being treated as well. and despite their service, and it's a really fascinating movie to watch, and it's definitely worth your time despite its very long runtime. At number 3, Soul, the only Pixar movie on this list. Soul is a beautiful movie, very well animated. The characters are fantastic, particularly Tina Fey. Jamie Foxx is also really good. The humor works really well. The message works really well about how you just, you have to, the importance is to live your life. It doesn't matter what you do with your life, just to live your life. How they blend all this animation is fantastic. The music is incredible. It's definitely one of Pixar's best within the last few years. At number 2 is another movie that I didn't get a chance to review, and that's called The 40-Year-Old Version. Version, not virgin. That was intentional by the filmmaker. And this is a movie about the whole creative process, about how, you have an idea, and about how people want to take that idea and kind of like turn it into something that's not how you imagine it. And I feel like this movie definitely captured that idea very well. Rada Black's screenplay, who also stars in the lead role, who also directed this movie. She's fantastic all across the board. Initially I was critical of the whole black and white cinematography, because I don't know if it's necessary. But then by the end it's okay, I can understand that more. I definitely do appreciate this movie. It can be funny, and it teaches, important message about, being yourself, and a really important message about that. And it's fantastic. I will say it's a really good movie. I almost put it at number 1, but my number 1 best movie of 2020 was Promising Young Woman, surprisingly. This is a fantastic, dark comedy. It's definitely very funny, but it's also very serious. It's also very horrifying. I usually like movies that do that, where it's they blend all of these different genres. At this moment's very funny, or this moment's very scary, and this moment's very, somber. And pretty much all the performances across the board are fantastic, particularly from Carey Mulligan, who gives a fantastic performance in this movie. She's great. Bo Burnham's also really good. It looks great, the message is great, and it never lets up. It never says, oh, we're gonna back off from this. No, it goes head on into the subject matter, and it works, it's effective, and it's an important movie to see at some point. So, those were my picks for the top 10 movies of 2020, and with any best list of 2020, there's gonna be a worst list. Oh boy. I better start drinking now. So, what are some of the best movies you saw last year? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat, and stay safe.